The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
You're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, Episode 33.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Hey everybody, I'm Father Andrew Kinstetter, aka Father Fett, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, where we talk about everything connected to that galaxy far, far away. I sure hope you're buckled in, because today we are going to be discussing our first impressions and thoughts on Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. And to just throw out the spoiler warning right away, we plan to talk right from the get-go, all things spoiler related, so if you have not seen the movie, please have an opportunity to watch the movie before joining us, lest you be spoiled on all things The Rise of Skywalker. We also plan to potentially reference The Mandalorian all the way from the first chapter through chapter 7. So we will be discussing all of those sorts of things. So if you want to go catch up before listening to us, please do so. If not, you have been warned, and we will be jumping right into all things spoilers. So hope you come along for the ride. Joining me on the panel today are, first of all, we have Andrew Hermes. Hey, Andrew.
What's up, Father?
Not much. Excited to be here. Second, we have Thomas Sanjurjo. Hey, Thomas.
Hey, Father. It's good to be back.
Third, we have Angela Cialana. Hi, Angela.
Howdy, howdy, everyone.
And last up tonight, we have Mike Creevy.
Hey, guys. Good to be back.
Awesome. So we're going to be talking Rise of Skywalker. We've all seen it. Some of us have seen it multiple times. I watched it again yesterday just to kind of reacquaint myself with things, and I'm sure still missed some of it.
And still, the box office is not high enough for them to say this was a smash hit. So that's impressive.
I think The Force Awakens was a lot more, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be hard for
makes sense.
any movie to catch Force Awakens other than Endgame.
So big for that one.
Yeah.
So I just want to know what was your guys' first impression as you walked out of the theater? What was going through your minds? And Mike, why don't we start with you?
I put a series of words down with ellipses after them, just to sort of it was like stream of conscious when I was trying to answer this question. What I put down was elation, joy, peace, resolution, and wonder. And some other things as well. But it was just, as much as I'm loving, and I really do, I love The Mandalorian. I love a lot of these, the potential for these streaming shows. I've been watching a lot more of the animated series, catching up on stuff, the last few months. But it just reminded me, it just feels like there's something about the kind of natural setting, I feel like, for Star Wars, in the theater, with people there, in my case, with being able to go with some family and friends, to be there for that relatively short amount of time for this one story in this case, even if it ties everything together, it was just sort of a real fun and joyful sort of experience that always has a real kind of unique character to it. So that was fun. And then really, the resolution, we'll get more into that later. A lot of questions I had are just things I wondered how they would tie them up that I don't know, I was pretty satisfied with, and it raised a whole new set of questions, but ones I thought I don't need to immediately know the answer to. It was just sort of kind of a very awe-inspiring kind of experience in a couple ways. So that was it in a nutshell, as best I can summarize.
Sure.
So
cool. Angela, how about you?
I've only seen it once, and I have to say that when I walked out of the theater, I felt just overwhelmed. And I feel like I'm still processing it, so that when I went back to work today and my coworkers were they know I love Star Wars and that I'm on the show, and they were like, hey, what did you think of the movie? And I didn't know what to tell them. I wasn't disappointed by the movie, but I like just saying that I liked it doesn't seem right. So I just don't know at this point.
I think that's
it seems very
fair.
divisive. Yeah, it seems like it's a very divisive movie in the commentary that's going on online right now. So I understand that sentiment.
Well, picking up from that, Thomas, what was your experience of it?
Okay, so I didn't like The Last Jedi. I didn't. It didn't feel right. I walked out of that movie not appreciating it, and I felt really upset about the direction that it had taken. And halfway through this movie, I was like, okay, I'm good. This is good. This is a Star Wars movie. We're good. I'm fine. It was way over the top in a lot of ways, and that bothered me. But at the same time, it kind of made fun of itself for it. So that was good too. I like that was one aspect that I really liked about it. But as far as the Star Wars movies goes, this was it. And so it's interesting because I had a conversation with my wife afterwards about being upset about Rian Johnson's take on Star Wars, and how, she said, well, what were we supposed to do? It was one director taking over for another director in a franchise that's got this huge fandom, and like, there's no way the guy could have won. There's no way he could have won. So he made the movie he was going to make. And I think that was a great way to frame it, because for me, then it says, okay, this was a person who was trying to put their stamp on the Star Wars universe, and it resists that in a way, especially in his main series of films. And so Rian Johnson's talked about coming back to do more Star Wars movies. I would really like to see him do a Star Wars movie that was a Rian Johnson Star Wars movie that wasn't part of the main line of Star Wars movies. And that, coming out of this movie going, okay, something felt right about this one that just felt off about The Last Jedi. And I couldn't put my finger on what it was, but it was there. It was definitely there.
I would echo a lot of those same sentiments, actually. But first or last up, Andrew, what was your experience?
Walking out of the theater, I had all the feelings. It was very overwhelming. It was jam-packed. It was quite a ride. It was definitely not boring. It was the pace was very, like I said, it was jam-packed to fit a lot into the 2 hours and 20 some odd minutes of runtime. And it kept going and going, and I guess it had that going for it. But for the most part, because of Emperor Palpatine coming back, even though I still have a lot of questions about how he came back, and I know we'll get into that, I'm sure. But just having him back was great, and I thought that they ultimately thought it was shaky, but they landed the plane. I thought, because ultimately, I like The Last Jedi. I have my problems with it. Mostly has to do with how they handled Luke's character. But overall, I did like a lot of the chances and risks that Rian Johnson took. I ultimately liked that movie. And what I liked most about that movie was the Kylo and Rey connection. Out of all the things JJ could have taken from The Last Jedi, probably the only thing he took was that Kylo and Rey connection and expanded on that. And that's what I loved most about this movie. I thought he did an even better job than Ryan did as far as their relationship and like the potential of their force powers, and it played a pivotal role in the film. That's something I wish they even explored a little more. But ultimately, it was something that, like Angela, I've only seen it once, so there's still a lot I need to process. I definitely need to go see it again to ultimately know how I truly feel about it. But I did have disappointments about it, and we'll get into it. But ultimately, I love the ending, and I love Kylo. Kylo is, if anything, from this new trilogy, if there's anything we were to gain was that character, and I love his character from Force Awakens to The Rise of Skywalker. I loved his whole arc, and I thought that they did him justice, and ultimately, wrapped at least this new trilogy up. I don't know if I could say it's the best ending for all 9 films, but I feel like, at least for this trilogy, they did the best they could, considering that they really had no plan from the beginning, which I think is the ultimate fault and kind of weakened each film in this trilogy. The fact that there was no vision is really what hampered it down. But as a film on its own, if you're just going to judge it by itself, I thought it was Star Wars. It was a great movie. It was a fun ride.
Awesome. Yeah. I think I sort of would echo some of all of your guys' points actually, but like Angela, I still don't even know how to like verbally describe how I'm feeling. My pastor did the same thing. He walked into my office yesterday and was like, "So what'd you think?" And I was like, "Well, I liked it. I enjoyed it." The word that I kind of kept going back to was I felt satisfied by it. I wasn't like euphoric, jumping with joy as I walked out of the theater. I think that was more of an experience with The Force Awakens when I first went and saw that. But it was, there's something just awesome about sitting in the theater and seeing A Long Time Ago in a Galaxy Far, Far Away, and then the opening John Williams music that is just so Star Wars. So yeah, I very much enjoyed it for what it was. I'm glad they landed the sequel trilogy in the way that they did, the redemption of Ben Solo, those sorts of things. And it's not, and I'll get into this, I think, kind of at the end, but I think it was a fitting conclusion to the trilogy as it is. It's not the story that I wanted, but it is a good conclusion, I felt. So I also wanted to talk about, before we kind of just jump into all sorts of corners of the movie, favorite and least favorite part of the movie. So I'll go first, and then I'll kind of let you guys jump in on this. And I know there might be multiples for each, but I think for me, at least, my absolute favorite part of the whole movie was how they dealt with Carrie Fisher and her role as Leia. It was somewhat obvious, I think, watching the movie, that you could tell the scenes were sort of stitched into the movie without necessarily being meant for it. But I really appreciated every time she appeared on camera. I was like, oh, it's Carrie, it's Princess Leia. And but in particular, I really liked her role in the redemption of her son, and that was essentially how she sacrificed herself in order to redeem Ben Solo. So that was kind of my favorite part. My least favorite part, I started to write something down, and I'm going to go with it, but then I'm going to clarify it because I thought about it a little more. I had written down originally my least favorite part was General Hux's role, because it was just so diminished and stunted, and he was such a fun villain to kind of watch. And I put that originally as my least favorite because I wanted to see more of him. But to clarify, as I was thinking more about it, actually what it did for me was, I think General Hux kind of embodies the cardinal, or the capital sin of envy, rather, because he ends up being the spy who is leaking information to the Resistance, but he's not doing it for noble intentions at all. He says, "I don't care who wins. I just want Kylo Ren to lose." And envy has this whole thing that you are sad at another's good. And of course, for General Hux, it's his perceived good that Kylo Ren has become the supreme leader and he has all the power, and General Hux is being forced down. But it at least kind of revealed that, okay, if you're going to go down the road of envy, you might actually do something right, but it's for the completely wrong reasons. And he kind of meets the end of that, and that's betrayal and death. So I think wish I would have seen him more in the movie, but he at least served a role that said, okay, envy is not the way to choose to do things. And I guess what was your guys' favorite, least favorite part? And we'll just kind of reverse the order. Andrew, what was that for you?
My favorite scene, hands down, was at the end when now Ben Solo is facing the Knights of Ren, and he and Rey are having their little force projections with each other, and Rey handing him the lightsaber, Anakin's lightsaber, to ultimately defeat the Knights of Ren with, was just that gave me chills, and that encapsulates what I love most about, like I mentioned earlier, about this trilogy, is their potential together. If they were both on the same side, whether it was dark or good, I mean, they would be unstoppable. And I just thought that was, I was clapping and cheering at that moment. I think the only time I did. Well, actually, no, there were a few other times. But certain cameos that we'll get into, I'm sure. My least favorite scene, as much as like I said, I love the Emperor being back. Whenever they would show like any exposition about how he got there, I just felt like it was just kind of shoehorned in. Like him talking about having a grandson, having a son, and then having a granddaughter. Like the whole backstory when they were showing the flashbacks of Rey's backstory, and her kind of remembering things or seeing it through the Force, however it worked. All of it didn't make much sense. That aspect of the film, I feel like, for a character like Palpatine to have had a family and to have no mention of it ever throughout the whole saga. I'm not sure if it's in any of the canon novels or anything like that. I haven't really read too many of them, but the fact that this family has never been talked about before, and there was no real great setup for it. It kind of like every time that came on, I was like, well, I kind of need more than that. I wish we had a little more. And from the opening crawl, I mean, you have Palpatine sends a broadcast out, whatever it said. I'm like, oh well, I guess we're not setting that up. Like it's he's here and everyone knows it. So that really bothered me most about the film. And if I had to narrow it down to a scene, I would say the whole explanation of Rey's parentage kind of just didn't work for me.
Okay, fair enough. Do you play Fortnite?
I do not, but I did hear about that Easter egg.
I don't play it either, but yeah. For those of you that don't know, the message that Emperor Palpatine sent out to the galaxy was actually apparently released in Fortnite the week before it came out in theaters. So they all knew that he was back, and we had to wait. Thomas, what about you?
Oh, I agree with Andrew on my least favorite scene. The revelation of her backstory just didn't fit. And I would say like the two things that I really wanted to be kept from Rian Johnson's iteration were the relationship between her and Ben, and and her parentage not being anybody. I really wanted that. I liked that. I thought that was a good kind of kick in the teeth. Like, she's a super powerful Jedi, but she doesn't have the lineage of a Jedi. Great. Okay, this is a new thing. So I was really disappointed in that decision. But in trying to make a 2.5-hour movie fit together and give her any reason to do anything, which is something that she hasn't had at all in the trilogy ever, it was important to make her have a reason to go and face Palpatine, and she didn't have it before that. So I understand why it was done. And I understand also why it felt hasty and kind of didn't fit together. But the turn of that is that I think I liked her character more in this movie than I did in either of the others. She felt like she fit. She felt more natural. She really worked through that whole sequence. And then my favorite part of the movie is the last scene when she's on Tatooine. And she's burying the lightsabers, and she stands up, and you see the setting twin suns mirroring the death of the Skywalkers, but she carries on the name. And that they bought that scene really, really well throughout the entire course of the movie, talking about the dyad between her and Ben, and the whole concept of the twins like going separate paths and then coming back at the end because that's important for them. That was just very poetic, very well done. And that I think is what really bookended the whole movie. Like, it really made the whole thing just kind of close on a note that you felt really good about.
Angela?
Well, when you said favorite part, I didn't interpret that as scene.
Doesn't have to be scene.
I'd have to say, yeah. My least favorite thing about the movie in general was the pacing, actually. I prefer to kind of have those moments where you can really rest with the characters and get into what's going on with them and their minds and their, I do like backstory kind of stuff, but, dialogue, just really seeing characters interact with each other. So those moments where we were able to like be on the same set for like more than a few seconds or a minute was great for me. But yeah, it just felt like dominoes falling the whole movie. And I just felt like, wow, this is so much. I think that's why I just felt overwhelmed. My favorite part or thing about the movie is for me, I just felt like everything was tied together from the prequel trilogy, the original trilogy, and the sequel trilogy. In particular with, and the animated series and all kinds of stuff. In particular with the scenes in the Sith Temple. I can tell you that, I've listened to, like, up to this podcast, I've listened to a lot of people talking about this movie, and I don't think any of them mentioned that opening scene where we see Kylo walking into the Sith Temple, and I was just like on the edge of my seat. My mouth was wide open. Like, I just love that stuff. And from watching Star Wars Rebels, I knew that it was a Sith Temple. Mm-hmm. So I was super, super excited about that. And also just the moment when Rey hears those voices, when she's in the Sith Temple and she hears those voices of the Jedi of the past. And that also to me was, I won't spoil anything, but to me that was a connection with Rebels as well. And I just loved it. I loved how everything felt so connected in those moments. And those are the things that, I love about Star Wars, is that spiritual side of it, as well as like just getting right into that story meat of it. So those are the things that I loved and did not like.
Awesome. Mike, you're up next.
I echo a lot of what you guys said about, at least the way the Palpatine thing was brought about. But I think, Thomas, is something you said kind of made me think too about, in a way, it's like, it's almost like you could say, if you're sitting around and you're like, well, what would Rey do if she found out she were a Palpatine? Like, it's kind of like, and then it answers that, I think, in a really satisfying way. But to do that, it seems like it. I don't know how else they could have come about without it just kind of seeming a little clunky in some ways. So I definitely thought, I'm still kind of, grappling with that a little bit. But the thing that I actually had down, I'll just mention in passing real quick, because I kind of changed my mind about my least favorite part. Because at first it was that I was still a tad confused about the Chosen One prophecy thing. But I've had a lot of development on that since I typed it up, and I might get into that a little bit later. So I punted on that one, and I'm going to go with a really stupid and sort of superfluous one. Where in God's name is Luke's green lightsaber?
Yeah.
So that's something, because for me, that was like always one of my favorite sabers. And, you see it in the flashback in The Last Jedi. And then nothing. And then, he shows up on Crate, and he's got the blue one. But not really, because so anyway. And I remember seeing that in the theater, and like that was bothering me. Like, of all the other debates and discussions people had, I kept coming back to like, where's this green one? Like, so and then I kept thinking like, well, yeah, maybe, oh hey, like Kylo's going good, maybe he's gonna go back to Octo and get the green one. And then I was like, oh no, okay, Leia's secret one, okay, that's cool too. So like, it was really like maybe just not that important, but it was just a big like question I had. That is still unanswered. So, but my favorite part by far is just, Ben's arc broadly. But man, that just, the end of that fight through the interaction with Han, and just that whole scene. I mean, I could watch that over and over and over again. First of all, I'm a huge sap. Secondly, for me personally, like the undoing of, the undoing almost verbatim of what happened on the catwalk. Mm-hmm. Like some of the dialogue is the same. So in the whole, like, and when he says in Force Awakens, I know what I have to do, but I don't have the strength, will you help me? And then it goes south, of course, but this time, I don't know if I have the strength, and Han's very encouraging, like, you do, and just, my son is alive. Kylo Ren is dead. Like all of the, like, tons of spiritual stuff packed in that. Mm-hmm. So many Catholic things, mm-hmm. And the most important thing of all, I think, for me in all of that is I wanted his redemption, but I don't think dare to sort of imagine it where it could come about through obviously Leia's role in that scene in a big way. And I'll get to that later, but some of my thoughts on that. But the big kicker for me is the idea of Han needing to forgive him. Like, it's, you can't just say, I'm sorry. and then you move on. Like the idea of it has to somehow be some kind of atonement, with, in this case, like his greatest sin. And that there had that restoration or that bond, that act of mercy, that love, that forgiveness, specifically from him. And even to slip in that very Han-like line, and he's like, Dad, like I'm tearing up as I'm watching it, of course. He's like, Dad. And he's just like, I know. I'm like, oh man, that's Han. Like that's Han's line, right? So anyway, that was, absolutely for me, the most incredible part of that, in terms of an interaction, at least. So I love that part.
Well, and then there too, I love the fact that he knows it's all in his head. And so it's him accepting the forgiveness that Han had already given him. Yeah. But like internalizing it, like really
in that moment where he touched his face. Yeah. Oh man.
Well, and there was a number of things too about that was pretty cool. I was talking with a friend about it, and he said, did you catch the fact that it was all like baptismal sort of imagery? Like, okay. And I started to connect the dots afterwards. I was like, oh yeah. They were on a water world for one. And of course that's not, inherently, a connection to baptism, but it's still there. The water world, just the whole notion, Rey stabs him with his lightsaber in the same way that Kylo Ren stabs Han in The Force Awakens. So it's a reversal of that.
The same lightsaber.
Yeah, same lightsaber, everything. And there's a real sense that that's the moment of redemption, and his parents play a role, just as parents would play a role in the baptism of their child. There's a literal figurative death of the old self as Kylo Ren dies, and even Kylo Ren, or Ben Solo at that point, throwing his lightsaber into the water is another just symbolic death.
Paul in Galatians too. I have been crucified with Christ, the life I now live. So the idea he's living this new life that's been given to him from outside himself. Right. Oh man. There's a lot there to go with.
And I guess I wasn't expecting it to happen that early on in the movie. So that was a surprise for me.
I'd like to talk about the characters, because I think that I don't know if it's just that the actors really fell into their roles or if the writing was just that much stronger, but I felt like they had a lot more in common in this movie. And that's one of the things that I love about the original three movies, is that you always feel like they just have this great camaraderie, even if they're at odds, even if there's something weird going on, there's always this great camaraderie between them. And I just did not feel that until this movie, until, they were actually just, and it was, the breakneck pace was important to it because it kept them moving actively together as a group. But there was also just a rapport between them that didn't exist for me before this film.
When it happened right from the beginning with them, I love them around the chess table, and like calling him a cheater, and then like Oscar Isaac's like especially like you're 250 years old, of course you're better than us. It felt fun, felt very Star Wars like.
It makes sense though that basically we've only seen two movies when it comes to the timeline, because 7 and 8. They happen one after another, and they just met, really. All these characters. So, a lot of people are kind of pointing to this as, oh, this makes it so much stronger than 8. But I really think that's not necessarily fair, because 8 was just a continuation of something we had just, we had really just gotten. Yeah. So now that years have passed in the story, it does make sense. And I did like that as well.
Yeah, I think the fact that they were just, all together, and they made it a point. There were many, many times in the film where, Rey is like, I'm going to go do this by myself. And then Finn and or Poe will be like, no, we're coming with you. There's nothing you can say that can stop us. So I think, that was one, I don't know if you want to call it a course correction or whatever from The Last Jedi, but like you said, in The Last Jedi they were separated, and in this one they made it a point to have them all together for a good portion of the film, and they all had a role in each other's success and ultimate victory at the end. So yeah, that's something, just their chemistry I think shine throughout in this film more than any of the other ones. And I thought that was a real accomplishment, considering that I don't think, Finn and Rey didn't have any scenes together in Last Jedi. So I really enjoyed that aspect.
And I wrote...
Can we talk about Finn?
Yeah, right, please. Let's talk about Finn, please.
Let's talk about Finn.
Yes. I definitely want to talk about Finn.
What did you guys think of his Force faith that he has now? I know a lot of people have been saying Force abilities, but the more I think about it, yes, there is like a certain hint at Force ability when he supposedly senses that something's gone wrong with Rey, that she's in pain or something. But I don't know. I think it's more maybe over time he has realized, hanging out with Leia perhaps, that the Force is a real thing, and he's, we've had kind of hints in the past, episode 7 in particular, that there are people who kind of belong to this Church of the Force type thing, that aren't necessarily, have a lot of midichlorians in their blood. So, which by the way,
we made it a whole half hour in before that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did y'all know that 7, 8, and 9, according to George Lucas, were supposed to be all about the midichlorians and the wills? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So I'm glad we didn't get that.
Yes.
But, I just happy. To mention something about this with Finn, because I was curious when I came out. I kept going back to like, what was it he wanted to tell her, and actually I just saw the other day that in a screening, I think on Friday or Saturday, some special screening somewhere, in the panel that came up afterwards, J.J. Abrams specifically answered that question and said that Finn wanted to tell her about his Force sensitivity, whatever you want to call it. So that's what he wanted to talk to her about that. So I was like, okay.
John Boyega's tweeted he was not going to tell her that he loved her. That's not what he was going to say. Which is, and I think it was a good thing that they've gone there. And I like that there are more characters that are popping up with this kind of like attunement to the Force that's not a Jedi attunement, but just it's a thing that exists. It's a thing that's real in their world. And to have only the Jedi be able to access it is really, it's very limiting. And so you got characters like Trut, and we talked about Kuiil in the last Mandalorian episode, and how he was had that greater sense of what the Force was, and kind of that almost religious perspective on it. And so I really like now that we have one of the mainline characters that has that same kind of thing. We don't know if he's a Force user or not, but but he does have that sensitivity to it that's just a little bit higher than like your average fuzzy dice in the mirror of their spacecraft.
It's almost like a laity, and I'm not to make a clerical distinction, but that, there is definitely like a monastic, obviously, aspect of the Jedi, and then the idea of like it can't just be them and then nobody else has any sort of intuition or any sort of faith. And I think that's a good way to put it. You guys have been saying like they're like a faith in the Force,
But I think that's also something that Rian Johnson brought up with The Last Jedi, the little kid at the very end of the movie, and using the Force to draw that broom to himself. That notion that you can be quote unquote a nobody and still be able to feel the Force and use the Force, and I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, that's one of the things that really bothered me about the film. I like the fact that he was Force sensitive. I thought that was really a very interesting, aspect to his character. And I saw the quote from the interview where they mentioned that he was going to tell her that he was having these Force sensitive things going on with him. But in the movie, they really set it up to make you think like he wanted to say that he was in love with her, because why else would he want to keep it a secret from Finn and from Poe, and why would he wait till he's about to die to tell her? I feel like why wouldn't he tell her that he's Force sensitive or might be Force sensitive before that? I couldn't find a good reason for that, and like I said, the movie like I didn't think that was a possibility until I saw that interview. Like I didn't even think of that.
Right.
I mean, I don't know if you guys did, but I was like, man, and there was no payoff at the end. Like they had that group hug at the end. They didn't even have to. They didn't even have a moment like where
like,
you gotta.
Like, can I be a Jedi? Yeah. Like,
yeah, they could have at least teased it. I don't know, somehow, like maybe show him like, floating floating some rocks up in the air or something. But there was really no payoff for that whole thing they set up in the film for Finn. So I kind of felt bad for him. And as much as I loved the story, his involvement in the story, I felt like his character development, kind of took a back seat. They introduced the Force stuff, but like they did the whole like battle between him. I guess he kind of already rose above that. His battle, between his past and being a part of the good guys now. But I feel like he was just kind of an instrument.
But it didn't get resolved. It didn't get resolved in The Last Jedi either. That's the thing that bothered me about his arc in The Last Jedi, is that he has this moment where he rises to the occasion. He becomes courageous. He's sacrificing himself, and then it's completely robbed from him. And like you're like, oh no, and so they don't deal with that at all in this movie. Which I'm like, oh my gosh, there's got to be more to that story, because that was a big moment for him, and to just have it kind of taken away and like swept out from under him. I like the character that he has become, but there is a step missing in there,
I feel like they kind of referenced that that first, what is it, the Battle of Crate, when they're on the destroyer and he's there with was it Janna? Or what's the name of that new character? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I think so, yeah.
So, and he's like, no, I'm going to stay here. He tells Rose, like, I'm going to stay here. We're going to get this thing done. And she's just like, she kind of looks like she's frozen. Like she hesitates. Like, should I really let him stay in this dangerous situation? And in my mind, I almost saw her kind of like flash back to Crate where, she saved him. So I did like that moment, even though it was short and Rose didn't really do that much in this movie. But it did kind of feel like they have, at least Rose has made some growth in that area where she did kind of learn that lesson, like, okay, I'm going to trust my friend and this is what he wants to do and this is important. So, this is a team effort type of thing.
Can I, if it's not too much of a subject change, can I throw in just a thought or two about the use of humor for just a second? Because I just, again, I don't want to, I personally did, enjoy, I love all the movies, but I did enjoy Last Jedi for different reasons. But I remember when I first saw it, that first scene where Poe taunts Hux, I laughed real hard. I still do when I see that. But the more I reflect on it, I think my criticism of that, and there's some of that in that movie, I just don't feel like that's the most organic humor to Star Wars. It's kind of like Jar Jar. I hate to bring him up, but it's like it's not the setting for that.
It bothered me the most because it completely infantilized the First Order.
Yeah,
and that's the thing that really bugged me about The Last Jedi, was that the First Order is not a credible threat. I didn't
Hux
feel that at all.
In Force Awakens, I mean, Hux comes across. I mean, I just rewatched him again this week to prep, and it's like, Hux, I think he comes across as a pretty kind of scary Nazi sort of like his speech on Starkiller Base is scary, and then it turned him into this like goofy, like, and even the way he, like, his facial expressions and his acting in Last Jedi is more like it just wasn't consistent. I felt some correction with that in this one. Where the banter, like, I love when they're on Kijimi and the Spice Runner thing comes out, and he's like, "You were a Spice Runner?" Like, "Oh, you were a Stormtrooper? Oh, scavenger? Huh? Like, I can do this all day." Like the idea, which we've talked about in the show before, not other spoilers, but the idea of like second chances, and choosing a new path, and how that's the case with all of them, which is cool. But my favorite, honestly, I loved it. For me personally, agree to disagree, that's fine. But I really liked, it was the simplest thing in the whole movie, when she does the lightsaber pass off and Ben's holding it and he just does that little like bow. He's just like,
yeah.
You know,
I love that.
Like,
oh my gosh, I love that.
There was something like Han-like about that. Like there was like a little, you know, I think like in his last moments, he's not Ben for long in this movie, and he doesn't say much, but there is something like, I think Snoke hinted at it. You know, you have too much of your father's heart in you, and that we finally get to see like, well, yeah, as it turns out, you know, he didn't want to be for a long time, but he is his dad's son. You know, and to kind of like once he finally lets go of that, they can even fit in, even when he jumped on the chain, you know, and he's just like, ow, you know, like there was just, he was fragile, but he was also his full self. So like, you know, he's powerful. He's exactly who he's supposed to be, which includes weakness and vulnerability and all that stuff he's been trying to run from in this pursuit of being strong and all that. So, but I thought the humor I just thought was much, much better in this, you know, not too much, not too little, you know. So I enjoyed that.
To kind of jump off that a little bit, I want to jump into C-3PO's story, because he was the one that I found like he's always been the comic relief. You know, I remember Attack of the Clones, and his head is dragging along the sand, and he's like, "Oh, this is such a drag." You know, the dad puns, right?
I'm beside myself.
Right.
Yeah.
And in this the movie, you know, I just burst out laughing when. And I don't even remember what point of the movie it is, but Babu Freak is mentioned again, and C-3PO, after his memory wipe, he's like, "Oh, Babu, he's my oldest friend.
He's my oldest friend."
So I appreciated his humor, but I also I really liked his story arc. He was way more involved in the story than I expected him to be. And his role as a droid, I thought, well, they kind of. They tease out the fact that he's more than just a droid. He's got, you know, his own personality, and as much as they kind of joke about treating him as just a droid, I really liked the fact that he was basically given the choice to sacrifice his memory for the team. He wasn't just kind of forced into it, but he got to choose for himself to, you know, give up this. And, you know, that's when he says, you know, I'm looking one last time at my friends, and you know, on go the tears, but yeah, so I loved his arc, and wanted to know what you guys kind of thought about that.
I loved it. I did love his arc. I loved everything that you said about the choice that he had to make, and it was very logical for him. I mean, granted, he is a droid, and he doesn't really have, you know, it can't really convey feelings, but this is Star Wars. I mean, we know he has feelings and he cares about his friends, and that line, even though they teased it in the trailer, I thought they shouldn't have put it in the trailer, but I thought it would have had more impact if they just let it play out in the film. Marketing for films these days is horrible. I mean, they ruin everything. But anyway, yeah, the only aspect about his storyline that I didn't like, it's more a commentary on the film as a whole. I totally did not think he was going to be gone forever. Like, I didn't feel like there were any stakes. Like, I totally like knew, like, okay, R2 is going to have a backup of his memory, and that was going to be fine. But in the moment, obviously, it was still emotional. They sold it well. But I felt like just the movie in general, one of the drawbacks from the film, I didn't feel like the stakes were high enough for a movie that's the final movie. A lot of things just were too convenient, whether it was C-3PO's memory coming back, whether them falling through the quicksand and just finding the dagger. Like, I mean, it was just so convenient. Like,
Chewie's okay.
Chewie was okay. Yeah. I didn't think. I mean, as much as I love Chewie, and man, did he have a rough time in this new trilogy. But as much as I love Chewie, I kind of wish that he actually died. You know, because just to feel some sort of, you know, stakes in this film. The fact that he was unscathed. I mean, he was totally fine. I just wish that the film, I know I'm probably going into another topic, but I wish the film had more stakes, because at every turn, whenever there was a threat, you kind of have the feeling like, well, it's going to turn out okay, because this is probably going to happen. And we see, you know, Ben is probably going to have a role in the end. And yeah, so that's that's all I wanted to bring up.
Of course, all the ships have a world-killing gun on them. Why wouldn't they? I love that line. They needed that line because it was just going to be way too much to say.
Yeah, I mean, I made my little prediction list I always do before, and I put in an envelope very ceremoniously and give it to my wife. And I'm like, we'll open this after dinner kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I had down, I thought Lando, Han, and Chewie, pull a Randy Quaid at the end of Independence Day, fly into something and blow something up, kind of kamikaze thing or something, some glorious thing. And I had down R2 or 3PO dies, but not both. So when all of them survived, I mean, I was happy because I think maybe because I had so specifically predicted someone would go, but I was like, wow, I was not expecting that.
I think maybe one of my bigger critiques of the trilogy as a whole, it definitely kind of piggies off of this, and I'm gonna get on my soapbox here just a little bit. I did enjoy the trilogy, but I agree that the stakes weren't quite there. I think Chewie, I don't want to say I want him dead, but I think having him actually die in that moment would have pushed the story in ways that I think would have been really interesting and necessary, and just set up the fact that the stakes that are high, that people can die, the main characters can die, and so just in general, I did feel like the sequel trilogy is still just a rehash of the Empire. Emperor Palpatine is back, and he's it's the First Order is really just a new version of the Empire. And the Final Order is the final empire to rule the galaxy, and that's kind of what he's about. So for me, I enjoyed that, but I just kind of felt it was a rehash of the same plot. And then to go to my soapbox, this is why I really, really enjoyed the Legends universe when they were putting out novels, 10, 20 years ago, because something that they did was initially they were writing novels and books, and they had to clear things with George Lucas, and he wasn't going to let them kill off any of the main characters. But then they started a 19-book series, The New Jedi Order, and in book 1, spoiler alert for this if you haven't gone there, but this is decades old now. Chewbacca has a moon land, basically crush him to death in the very first book of this 19-book series. And what that did was it just, anybody who's reading these books realized, oh, this is real. The main characters can die, and there is actual, investment into these characters. And, I'm not just going to read another story about the adventures of Han, Luke, and Leia, and they're just going to, get to the end and all survive and everybody's happy. And so it set up the stakes of the threat that they face throughout that whole series. And I really, really, really love it. And it's one of those, I go back to those books all the time. And that's something that, sure, there were deaths in The Rise of Skywalker, but they didn't quite hurt very much. Snap Wexley is one who dies in that final battle.
I wanted to feel more bad about it.
Exactly. I wasn't
and you can see
to
Poe in the one trailer with that reaction, and he's so intense. Like, you're like, who dies? And then when it's Snap, I felt bad. I'm like, oh, well,
right.
It was just him.
Right.
Okay.
That's
wasn't even
extra
Wedge.
Yeah.
Poor Snap.
It kind of makes you think, and I totally got this feeling, is that I know, like, in all the interviews and the press junkets, they're all, everyone obviously made it very clear, like, this is the last film that you're going to see any of these characters, and this is the end of the Skywalker saga, and we're gonna, whatever movies we see going forward are gonna be totally different characters, different corners of the universe, different timelines. But I got the feeling that I think that's not what they thought as when they were filming. Like, again, going back to Finn being Force sensitive, I feel like they could have totally done a spin-off with him. Exploring that aspect. The fact that we're talking about keeping all the main characters alive. I feel like they maybe had a plan that down the road, you play with these characters again.
Yeah.
I think something happened post-production where I think the actors may have been maybe burnt out, maybe didn't want to deal with the pressure anymore. You know, you can theorize all you want about that, but I kind of got the sense that like there wasn't enough finality to some of the newer characters, and maybe that's why we have all these questions, is that maybe they were planning on answering them at some point, but doesn't look like we will.
I saw somewhere John Boyega said, like, they asked him about like Finn's story, and he just goes, "You're not going to Disney Plus me." Like, so he may be the first person to use Disney Plus as a verb. So yeah, I guess that's out supposedly.
They did tease Lando and Janna as a possible,
extension.
Comic book.
It's kind of weird too that the song that they played, just that brief little clip. I want to go back and double check, but I was able to see it twice too, thankfully. But the when she's talking to him at the end, that's some of the same music from when Luke and Leia were discussing being brothers and sister and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I was, I don't know, like I didn't expect that. I honestly thought that we were going to find out she was Finn's sister. That's kind of what I was hoping for, quite frankly. I thought that would have been nice, like family connection finality for him, but I guess it wasn't really all that necessary. But
speaking of Lando, I think Lando was awesome. I felt like they used his character perfectly, and he played a pivotal role in the film, and they didn't just kind of put him in for like a funny cameo where he actually
and it was pivotal but not central. You know, it wasn't like it wasn't like we need to spend a whole lot of storyline on it. It's like, hey, you're gonna go get everybody and bring them here, and that's good. It's really important, but also not like taking away from the story of the new characters that we're coming to like and learn about.
And I had to laugh a little bit that, like, you know, nobody came at the Battle of Crate, but all you got to do is throw Lando at it, man. Like, he's so cool. Like, just like just send Lando. You'll get the biggest fleet in the history of the galaxy because it's Lando.
One of the things that I liked about Lando's role was a theme that is central in Star Wars is fear. You know, from the very beginning, Anakin has a lot of fear. Then in, you know, the original trilogy, obviously Luke is facing his fears as well, about his father. And with Rey, we did see that a lot, and that's a whole nother podcast for me. But, you know, the idea that, is it Zori, the new character, she tells Poe is, they win when they make you believe you're all alone. And there was a lot of that fear for Poe in particular, that they weren't going to win because they were all alone and no one was going to come. And so, you know, Lando's role also, just like thematically, was to reinforce that idea, you know, that everybody needs to work together and that we aren't alone. We can do it together. And I sensed a lot of that throughout this whole trilogy, really, was the importance of friendship. And I mean, yeah, all of Star Wars, but in this particular trilogy, I really felt like they were sending a message through these movies socially. And you could talk about, you know, sociopolitically what's happening in this country right now. But there's a lot of, I think, that happening with Lando's character, with Poe, with Rey, and all kinds of stuff is fear and teamwork and all that.
Yeah, I was going to say that I really felt that too, that community is very a strong theme seen with Lando and Chewbacca, but also even with Poe at the very end when he's like thrust into the role of being the general. And he doesn't know what to do. And Lando gives him a pep talk. But he goes to Finn and says, I can't do this alone. And he brings him on board. And so that whole idea just really, I think, resonates with who we are as human beings, is that, you know, when we are alone or feel like we're alone, that's when we're most vulnerable.
Right.
And I loved that dynamic, too, because that's very spiritual. That like Satan's tactic, one of his tactics is to make you feel like you're alone. And of course, we're not. But when you feel like you're alone, you're way more vulnerable to all sorts of sin and temptations and to just kind of falling off the radar. And I appreciated that because the whole movie kept drawing back like, no, we have to do this together. Rey tries to go off by herself and Poe and Finn are like, no, we're coming with you. and that whole idea, and it was just kind of reinforced that's basically how they win. Even Rey going down to Exegol and the Sith temple, and Ben joining her down there. She wasn't alone, and actually she finally hears all the voices of the Jedi of the past, giving her inspiration and encouragement. And I loved that whole scene too, because I don't know if you guys kind of saw this too, but I saw it as almost like when Rey was going there, a descent into hell. Like she descends down into the pits of this Sith temple. Emperor Palpatine is very clearly the symbol of evil, the Satan character, and his focus on hatred, and it was very eerie to see the legion of old Sith souls, if you want to call them that were chanting in the stands, and what ultimately helps Rey defeat the Emperor is her willingness to, first of all, not give in to her hatred and strike him down, but her willingness to sacrifice herself for everyone was totally Christian in that sort of thought. And then, of course, Ben helping her out too. I thought that was just a phenomenal scene.
Ben's moment with Han, when Han is talking with him, he references the fear of being alone too, and Han says, "No, yeah, I know your mom's gone, but the things that she stood for are still there." And like you can go back to that. That's what you need to go back to. And so there was also that encouragement to belong to the community there as well.
And I think the community of saints, motif with the, I went back and forth on this a little bit because, in terms of like trying to look at it from the standpoint of what did I want versus what was there, and did I want the wrong thing? Like, and I kind of had that little debate, and it was specifically about, I think I wanted to see a bunch of Force ghosts. And the more I thought about it, I thought, well, I think an argument can be made, at least for that probably would have been more distracting than the voices. Because if I'm there looking like, oh, there's so-and-so and there's so-and-so and there's, which, don't get me wrong, it'd be cool. but it's like that wouldn't, the more I think about it, it wouldn't have been as effective. Where like, no, I'm focused on her, and I had the Hebrews 12 quote, the great cloud of witnesses, right? That beautiful imagery. A lot of familiar voices in there, which also helped me, for me personally, I think, clear up maybe a little bit of the Chosen One thing, because I feel like the Chosen One thing is supposed to be just sort of a perennial mystery to some degree. Because I went back and looked at the actual transcript of it, and Hayden, it says, bring the balance, Rey, as I did. The Force surrounds you, let it lift you. Like, he's a couple lines in there. And then they're all saying different stuff to her. And so I was just really, for me, it's like, I think what was coolest for me ultimately with that whole scene was that, she doesn't just kill him with a lightsaber. There's not some fight. I mean, we've seen him lightsaber duel. Well, okay, don't need to see that again. What I loved, for me, I found it incredibly satisfying that as far as I saw, she got rid of him the way Mace started to and was interrupted. That it's deflecting his own power back on him, and that's basically how she pulls it off. And that your own evil, you can get all this power and all this, but it's ultimately going to backfire on you and destroy you. That it's its own destruction. And I just, there was a lot of that in there too. I found very compelling.
Yeah. Just to go back to the point that you made about not seeing too many Force ghosts, I had the same feelings. Like, that would have been really cool, but like, this is very much about Rey, and she didn't know those other Jedi that we would want to have had showed up. She probably would have looked at them and be like, oh, okay, you guys were Jedi. That's pretty much all I know about you guys.
Cool.
Yeah, right on. So I think and then it probably would have been really, really expensive to get all of them on screen. So I think that might have had something to do with it. And
like, do you think they just have like Sam Jackson and some of these, like, do they just share like an MP3 on Google Drive, or something like, or Dropbox? JJ's like, just send me your clip here. I want you to say, okay, because
I would not be surprised. Yeah, that's but yeah, and I also want to point out, will Star Wars finally learn its lesson and stop throwing people down pits because no one ever is gone.
So many pits
when they're thrown down a pit.
Like, you'd think the emperor of all people should have been like,
Right?
wait a minute.
I was like, why is he doing that
fell.
Yeah. Why did he throw Ben down a pit? Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. But yeah, I just thought that was funny.
Well, talking about the Force Ghost things too, I think it fit best with her character because she had been for the whole movie trying to summon up, the be with me thing, the be with me thing,
Yep.
be with me. And in this moment they were, but they weren't beside her. They weren't around her. They were inside of her, and that was the real thing, is that she was looking for someone else to push her forward. And what she really had to do was just summon it up from inside and do it that way.
Well, it's like Luke's thing, right? Like, this is your fight.
Yeah. And that's what it came down to, is like she really had to embrace who she was and move forward with it. And I can't see of a storyline way to have gotten her to go as far as she did with this whole fight with the Emperor and then made it work in a 2.5-hour movie. But I really think that it would have been even better if there were there's no genetic reason why she is here. She's just the right person for the job. Right. And that's it. That's just all there was to it. I think that would have been an even better, it would have been an even stronger push for that storyline. But, as it works out, it works out. I think you, by the end of the movie, you kind of see her, she's shed who she is. And that's why we get that really impressive moment at the end when she's asked who she is, and she says Rey. And earlier in the movie, she'd said, no, just Rey. That's it. And now at the end, she turns around and looks and sees the twins, and she knows that she's been adopted.
Well, do you guys think it's more of a, because I was wondering about this, I want to reflect on it more, but is it too much of a stretch if, like, having her be Palpatine's granddaughter and then also this sort of beneficiary in so many ways of the Skywalker's lineage, like, that you had, if you go back to the original trilogy, like the two Sith, the Sith are, Vader and Palpatine, and that you have in this way, this converging in her, like a permanent destruction of that. Like it's Palpatine's own granddaughter. There's almost like a redemption through her of that line that's going to go on now and be, I don't know. I'm thinking about some of that.
Yeah, I totally liked the angle, and I could see the angle. And it makes sense that she's a Palpatine because it does a number of things. It explains, why she was so powerful, with the Force without having been trained before. It also, like you said, it kind of, her ultimately defeating Palpatine and choosing the Skywalker name at the end just ends the Palpatine line. And so there's no chance of any more Palpatines running around, or at least anyone that could potentially be as powerful as him, turning
like
to,
almost like what he
Sith.
could have been if he hadn't turned to the dark side, something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, the only thing I think it lacked was the backstory.
Right.
But other than that, I think that was a good way to kind of explain how powerful she was.
Well, and we as fans just sort of have this natural instinct when we watch Star Wars that there is something to your legacy and to your ancestors. And I mean, so that's just sort of inherent in the whole story of Star Wars, from all the movies. And so I think it was natural to keep assuming that Rey's parents were not just quote unquote nobodies, but that there was some sort of ancestral lineage there to follow. But I think the movie also points, kind of takes that, establishes that there's a lineage, but also kind of flips it and says that, like, family is important, but so is right. Like so is your adoptive family. And I mean, she is a Palpatine, but she doesn't actually claim that at the end. She claims to be a Skywalker because it's her adoptive family. So
that's
it was
one of my wife's
a
favorite things was the adoptive stuff, because she does stuff with foster care, and so anyway, that was just a big thing for her. She really liked that.
And there was, I was reading an article online, too, of just that's even just the notion of spiritual adoption, of who we are as adopted sons and daughters of God, that, blood is important, but it's not everything. So, really appreciated that.
I will say I agree with my wife on one thing about the prophecy, the balance of the Force prophecy, is that it felt incomplete that Ben died, because you have in those two characters coming out of that moment a character who didn't give in to their baser instincts, who overcame it as a much more bright character, and then a character who really did dip into that darkness and has come back from that to find a better way. In the two of them, you have this almost yin yang kind of balance that would have been a really great way to wrap things up. And that's my wife's one complaint coming out of the movie was like, man, you know, I mean, it's not about Adam Driver or anything like that, but it's just like these two characters really offset each other very well, and they were supposed to be bringing balance to the Force, right? This is a good way to have done it, and then we're left with just Rey, and it's kind of she felt that was a missed opportunity in that too.
When I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was like, Why didn't Ben just give her half of his Force life? Like why did he have to give it all?
We were joking about like just an endless okay, here's some of my life, and they keep going back and forth forever. Like
that's why he had to disappear, right? He had to just like, okay, can't do that. There you
go. Did we think that he should have been a Force ghost at the end, or was it important to have it be Leia and Luke? Just those two. I don't know.
I don't know. I felt like I think it may have been cool, but I think to really, because they were on Tatooine and she was on Tatooine, and because it was selling the fact that she's going to claim to be a Skywalker. And I know, I guess, yeah, Ben is a Skywalker too.
But not as much as the two of them, I guess. Yeah,
but,
right. That makes sense. Yeah,
and maybe he's still figuring out how to be a Force ghost, because he was only a Jedi for like 20 minutes.
Yeah, 20 minutes.
Yeah. So maybe he's still figuring that part out. But I wanted to quickly mention. I wanted to ask everyone. Did you guys also wonder like who the mom was? Like,
yeah,
like that, because like when you're thinking, and also the other big question is, did Palpatine have a child post his post destruction or pre?
Yep.
So who would choose to, or was it like even creepier? Did he just use his powers to coerce someone to sleep with him? Like, how did that work? Whole bunch of questions.
You don't have to do that in Star Wars. Star Wars is like science fantasy, so you can have all kinds of things frozen or whatever made in a lab or something.
People don't even use the bathroom really that much at all, apparently. So.
Except in The Mandalorian, we see it.
Yes.
Yeah, there were a bunch of Snokes.
Like Rey's
I don't know, what were the backup Snokes? Like, what were they like?
Oh, that was cool.
What was he prepping those for? Were those like failed Snokes? Like, I don't know what they were. Yeah, it was.
Well, and the other question that I had with the Snokes was, how did Snoke have a connection to the Force? Like, if he's just a clone, and the reason that I'm asking this question is because I think there might be a connection to the Mandalorian here. Snoke is obviously just a created being, a clone. And so I'm wondering if somehow in that process, the Emperor, I don't know, had to somehow inject him with, dare I say it, midichlorians. But, that could be related to why Moff Gideon in The Mandalorian is so bent on getting Baby Yoda.
There's been some canon stuff about, like, sort of haunted items. I hate to say it, but there were a lot of Harry Potter connections too. Like a Horcrux type thing. But Snoke's ring supposedly from Mustafar, and there's some, I don't know. I haven't read that, but I've seen some hints at some of that stuff that there might have been Sith sorcery involved in some way, shape, or form. I don't know though.
Well, and there was also this is kind of off topic a little bit, but and I'm forgetting the name of it, but there's the idea that by touching an item you can sense the past of that particular item, and it's in the video game.
Force power.
Yeah, it's in the video game Jedi Fallen Order, and I haven't played it enough to know. And I think one of the Jedi Quinlan Vos, I think in Rebels,
yes,
has that ability to sense the past of an object when he touches it.
Rey does it twice.
What?
She does it with Anakin's lightsaber, and she does it with the Sith dagger. When she picks up the Sith dagger, she knows kind of the history of where it's been. So.
The other connection to the Mandalorian that I think that we haven't yet touched on was just the Force ability, the Force healing ability that Rey exhibits. And I was having seen the Mandalorian, I wasn't surprised at all to see it in The Rise of Skywalker. But for those that hadn't seen the Mandalorian, I think it was good that they introduced it as her healing that snake creature first before then healing Ben Solo later on in the movie.
Well, and that's apparently an exceptionally rare ability, and the only time we have an indication of it before some of the later legend stuff where it talks about Luke's son or grandson having that ability is that it was a Sith power. Like the ability to heal, put things back together wasn't actually a Jedi power. And there are small instances of it, but it's very, very rare. So it's an interesting thing that they bring up in the movie that's a capability that she has.
Yeah, so does that make it inherently a Sith power or a Jedi power?
No.
Or is it just using the Force?
I think this is the new canon, so it seems that they've made it a Jedi power. In the past, it showed up in both situations.
And they destroyed that kind of hierarchy of like, there is a right and wrong way to do things.
Well, I feel like too, I think the interesting thing to me was the contrast between, and I kept going back and rewatching I love the opera scene, of course, from episode 3, and then just some of the connections and the rest of that with, what's he trying to do? Palpatine, that is, and the power to cheat death, as he refers to it, and that kind of thing, where it's always about, and again, a real Christian connection here, right? Like it's always about taking that fruit off the tree. Like in one way or the other, it's there's something I'm going to abuse or manipulate, to my own advantage. Where the 3 times, but well, is it 4 now? 4 times we've seen Force healing. I think it's 3 in this movie, and then the other one. But the idea that it's like I'm giving of myself life to you, even if it might kill me. Which is absolutely as far opposite of what Palpatine ever would do, So I really liked that too. The idea of, that everyone, and I think if you look at all the movies now too, it's cool that every Skywalker does this, that Vader gives his life, in this way to save Luke. Luke gives his life to save Rey and save the Resistance. Leia gives her life for Ben, and for Rey. Ben gives his life for Rey. I just love that becomes the legacy of this family, that they go through a lot. They struggle, do some terrible things sometimes, but in the end, the last thing that they do is that. So I really thought that was pretty powerful and a good usage of that as a Force power for that too.
I think we're running a bit late on time, so let's kind of wrap this up. Did you guys have anything final that you kind of wanted to throw out there as a major thing that you wanted to say?
You wanted to rank them.
Yep. So I wanted to throw out the ranking system of the 9 major episode movies. So, and just kind of I wanted to see what everybody thought in terms of where The Rise of Skywalker fits in with all of that. And so I'll go first, and then I'll kind of let you guys fill in what you guys think as well. So for me, my rank of the 9 goes from, in my opinion, my favorite to least favorite. Favorite would be episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. Second favorite would be episode 2, Attack of the Clones. I know that might be a bit controversial, but that was my first one that I saw in theaters, and it's also where Jango Fett is, so I kind of love that one. Third on my list was The Force Awakens, episode 7. And then I placed The Rise of Skywalker as 4th on my list underneath the Force Awakens. Number 5 for me was Return of the Jedi. Number 6 was A New Hope. 7 was Revenge of the Sith. 8 was The Phantom Menace, and then last for me was The Last Jedi.
Interesting.
That's my list.
Different. All right, I agree with you on the first. So mine go. Empire Strikes Back is absolutely the first. The second I would say is A New Hope. Just the classic started it all. Very much an important movie. And then I put The Force Awakens as my third. Return of the Jedi as my fourth. Then it gets really kind of sketchy from there. I think this one probably falls in as my fifth. And fifth for this one, then all the way down to my last two, which my last two are The Last Jedi is my second to last, and the Attack of the Clones is actually my least favorite movie. Because in my opinion, it was just totally forgettable like that. And that as a Star Wars movie, like I can deal with a bad Star Wars movie, but a Star Wars movie that I just like, I can't even remember the major things that happened in that movie. That's really bad.
I'll forgive you for
that. Yeah, mine's a little different. We do share. Attack of the Clones is my least favorite. That's all the way at the bottom for all the same reasons. But my favorite Star Wars movie is Return of the Jedi, and then Empire. They're kind of like 1A, 1B. But I'm all about the Ewoks, so Return of the Jedi edges it out. And then it goes A New Hope, and then The Force Awakens. And I think I'll put The Rise of Skywalker right there at number 5. I think it's The Last Jedi. I'll put right under it. I'll put all the prequel films at the bottom. I feel like this new trilogy, each and every film was better than the prequels. So I would put Revenge of the Sith as the best of the prequels, then The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. Yeah, The Rise of Skywalker, I don't know if it's better than Force Awakens. I still love that movie a lot. I feel like it had the nostalgia and a little bit better pacing. So I think, maybe more, as any list goes, it's fluid, but that's where it stands right now.
Mike?
I'm gonna, if it's okay, I'm gonna give mine from least favorite up to most favorite, just to mix it. Because the reason what I did with this was, and I don't know why, but it occurred to me to try thinking of like, if I'm gonna just kick back and pop in a Star Wars movie. Like that was kind of how I just approached it. It's like, if I just want to watch, and I don't need a whole saga-wide thing, like I just want to watch a good Star Wars movie, the last one that I'm going to put in is Episode 1. I loved it when it came out, but it just, like over the years, I don't know if I've just watched it too many times or what, but it's fun, but I like other stuff better. Episode 2, I like just a little bit better than that. Then after that, I'd probably say 8. As much as I do enjoy that, compared to a lot of the other ones, it's not the one I'm going to really go to over and over. Like The Well, I'll keep revisiting. Moving up from that, I really like Revenge of the Sith. Then probably next would be Episode 4. And it's tough because it's like, it's so classic. It's the first one, but it's, compared to the other ones, like if I really want to get a, huge satisfying movie experience, that doesn't always do it for me. I have to be in the right mood for it, I think, sometimes. Then it's Return of the Jedi, and then I gotta say, right now at least, and my 2 and 3 keep flipping back and forth for me, but I'd put 9, and then at the 3 spot, number 2 spot, Episode 7, and top of the list for me, no surprises, Empire Strikes Back. Nothing can unseat that for me. Everything about it is just a masterpiece. I love it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for me, I'll always say that Return of the Jedi is my favorite because it's the first Star Wars movie I ever saw, and I saw it with my dad. But I really can't rank the Star Wars movies. I just can't. I am such a scrupulous person that I have to have like a specific criterion given to me in order to rank anything. And especially something like Star Wars that I just love for so many different reasons. Any given day it could change. This weekend I rewatched 1 and 2, and I gotta say, they surprised me in how much I enjoyed them. So, it's just, but I would say that I definitely have to continue to watch Rise of Skywalker many more times to continue to appreciate it for sure.
Cool. Well, that's it from us. I fully expect that we will revisit The Rise of Skywalker in a future episode, more than likely once it hits the Disney Plus and the streaming platforms. So stay tuned for that coming down the road. But what did you guys all think of The Rise of Skywalker? Be sure to email us your thoughts, your comments on our Facebook or Twitter page and let us know. And you can definitely email us any feedback, and that email address is starwars@sqpn.com. And you can find StarQuest on Facebook at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia and on Twitter at SQPN. And now we'd like to take a moment and thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Star Wars, including John H., Mark S., Thomas D., John B., and Ted K. Their generous donations at sqpn.com make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Star Wars and all the shows that we make here at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. Also, be sure to subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or you can find us on YouTube at the SQPN YouTube channel. To find previous episodes of The Secrets of Star Wars, please visit sqpn.com/Star Wars. And we will be back next week when we will be discussing the 8th and final episode of Season 1 of The Mandalorian. So until then, Thomas Sanjurjo, thanks for joining me and sharing The Secrets of Star Wars.
It was a pleasure being here.
Angela Cialana, thanks for joining us tonight.
It was a pleasure.
And Mike Creevy, thanks always for joining us as well.
It's always a blast.
Andrew Hermes had to duck out slightly early, so we're saying goodbye for him as well. And once again, I'm Father Andrew Kinstetter. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Wars on StarQuest.